Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have class on arginine, histidine, and lysine, which are the basic amino acids. So here we have, for if we see the structure of arginine, it has got a guanidine group here. NHC double bond NH2 plus NH2, that is the guanidine group. And in lysine, in the side chain possesses an additional amino group. And in histidine, there is an possesses an imidazole ring structure. Okay, so these are the basic amino acids: arginine, lysine, and histidine. We start with arginine. Arginine, it is a highly basic amino acid, and it is semi-essential, and it is glucogenic. If we see the metabolism of arginine, we know in the urea cycle, arginine is cleaved by arginase into urea and ornithine. And this ornithine, from ornithine, it can synthesize the polyamines such as putrescine, spermidine. Then ornithine can be converted to, it can be transaminated to glutamate semialdehyde and then to glutamate. And from glutamate, it can be converted to glucose. Glutamate will be first transaminated to alpha ketoglutarate, which enters the TCA cycle, and then we can synthesize glucose. Then apart from that, arginine is converted. From arginine we can synthesize nitric oxide, then creatine, from which creatine phosphate can be synthesized, which can be stored in muscles and used as energy during muscle contraction. Then arginine is involved in the synthesis of proteins. So if there is congenital deficiency of ornithine aminotransferase enzyme, it can lead to elevated plasma and urinary ornithine, which causes atrophy of the retina. And if there is a congenital deficiency of ornithine citrulline antiporter, that is in urea cycle, citrulline, it is transported from mitochondria to cytoplasm, and ornithine from cytoplasm to mitochondria. So if that antiporter is deficient, it can lead to hyperornithinemia, hyperammonemia syndrome. So we come into the detailed aspects of metabolism of arginine. From arginine we can synthesize the compound creatine. So here arginine, it condenses with glycine to form a guanidoacetic acid. Actually the amidino group, that is C double bond NH, NH2, this group is transferred to glycine, and it is converted to a compound called guanidoacetic acid. And guanidoacetic acid, it is methylated using acetinosyl homocysteine to form creatine. Acetinosyl methionine. Acetinosyl methionine is thereby converted to acetinosyl homocysteine. And creatine can be phosphorylated to creatine phosphate, and it can be stored in muscles, and it can ATP energy can be used from creatine phosphate, and during muscle contraction, then creatine phosphate can be again converted to a compound called creatinine. Next is, from arginine we can synthesize another important signaling molecule, which is known as nitric oxide. So we'll be seeing the detailed aspects of nitric oxide. It is an uncharged molecule having an unpaired electron. So here we can see in the nitrogen there is an unpaired electron, and it is highly reactive free radical, and its half-life is only about 0.1 second. So earlier nitric oxide, it was considered as a toxic pollutant of air and automobile exhaust, but now it is it is shown to possess more potential biological functions. You see the synthesis of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, it is formed from arginine by nitric oxide synthase. Okay, so from arginine, nitric oxide is formed from by the enzyme nitric oxide synthase. And this enzyme nitric oxide synthase, it contains heme, then it contains FAD, FMN, NADPH and tetrahydrobiopterin. And calmodulin is required to modulate the activity of nitric oxide synthase. So here the guanidine group of arginine. This guanidine group of arginine, it is guanidine nitrogen. Actually, this nitrogen is incorporated into nitric oxide. And from the molecular oxygen is also being utilized. So from the molecular oxygen, one oxygen is added to nitric oxide and another oxygen is added into citrulline. Okay, so this is a enzyme is a dioxygenase. So nitric oxide, it is synthesized from arginine by the enzyme nitric oxide synthase. The metabolic fates of nitric oxide. Nitric oxide, it can combine with oxygen and it can form nitrites, and this can be excreted through urine. And nitric oxide, when it reacts with hemoglobin, it can be converted to nitrates, and that also can be excreted through urine. Very low amount of nitric oxide can be expelled through the lung. Also, this nitric oxide, it is on exposure to a superoxide anion, which is a free radical. So these free radicals are they causes peroxidation of cells. It can cause lipid peroxidation, and it can cause cellular damage or tissue death. So this nitric oxide, when it is exposed to superoxide anion, it is converted to a highly reactive free radical, so which is known as peroxynitrite. So this can cause lipid peroxidation, cell injury and cell death. Now coming to the isoenzymes of nitric oxide synthase. Nitric oxide synthase exists in three forms. Okay, and these three isoforms are products of three different genes. So the three different isoenzymes, one is specific in the neurons, which is neuronal nitric oxide synthase, or nitric oxide synthase 1. And there is macrophage nitric oxide synthase. It is also known as inducible nitric oxide synthase or nitric oxide synthase 2. Then there is endothelial nitric oxide synthase, which is designated as nitric oxide synthase 3. So first we have the neuronal nitric oxide synthase. This is seen in central and peripheral neurons, and it is used for neuronal communication. This is a cytoplasmic enzyme which can be activated by calcium, and there are nitrogenic neurons which are seen in cerebellum and gastrointestinal tract. In this nitric oxide synthase, this is implicated, this is seen in the long, has role in the long QT interval syndrome. Okay, so here it's a long QT interval syndrome means where there is increased risk for irregular heartbeats. Second, we have the macrophage nitric oxide synthase or inducible nitric oxide synthase. It is seen in macrophages and neutrophils. Can also be present in hepatocytes, and these are induced by cytokines. Cytokines, which are the cells of immune system, and they are also involved in signaling pathways. So certain cytokines such as interleukin 1 and tumor necrosis factor. So this macrophage nitric oxide synthase 2, it is induced by cytokines, and also during inflammation also it is induced, and this is independent of intracellular. So this macrophage nitric oxide synthase 2, this is independent of intracellular calcium. Next we have the endothelial isoform. This is seen in endothelial cells. Then it can also be seen in platelets, endocardium and myocardium. So this causes arterial relaxation. And this enzyme, this isoform is also activated by calcium. And this is localized in plasma membrane. Unlike the other two, they are seen in the cytoplasm. So this endothelial nitric oxide synthase, it is seen in the plasma membrane. Now we'll see the mechanism of action of nitric oxide. So here this nitric oxide synthase, it is activated by acetylcholine. So how it is activated, we'll see. So here acetylcholine, it binds with the receptor, and signal is produced. It is transmitted through a compound called inositol triphosphate, and it causes the release of calcium ions, and this calcium ions can activate nitric oxide synthase. And this so when it activates the nitric oxide synthase, so if we see in case of endothelial cells, any nitric oxide dependent vasodilators, they can attach with the receptor in the cells, and they lead to the release of calcium ions, and these calcium ions activate the nitric oxide synthase. So it converts arginine. From arginine, nitric oxide is produced, and when it is produced, it can diffuse to the adjacent smooth muscle cells. And here this nitric oxide activates an enzyme called guanylate cyclase. So GC, which is shown as GC, that is guanylate cyclase. So this guanylate cyclase, it hydrolyzes the GTP into cyclic GMP. Okay, and this cyclic GMP, it activates a protein kinase in the smooth muscles, and it causes relaxation. Those kinases, they cause dephosphorylation of myosin light chains, and this leads to relaxation of muscles. Okay, so thus nitric oxide, it acts as a vasodilator. Next is physiological actions of nitric oxide. So it has got actions in different systems. So first there is its actions on blood vessels. It is a potent vasodilator. So it can dilate the arteries of it can dilate cerebral arteries, coronary, renal and muscle arteries. So it causes vasodilation. So here this is normal permeability and blood flow in blood vessels. With the action of nitric oxide, it increases blood flow and permeability of blood vessels. Okay, and it maintains normal blood pressure. So if there is any deficiency of nitric oxide, it can lead to hypertension. Leads to hypertension. So, but if excessive production of nitric oxide is seen, it can result in refractory hypotension. Refractory hypotension is the circulatory collapse, which can be seen in surgical patients. Although they have a normal blood volume, but there is inadequate circulation. And it is seen in patients with septicemic shock, which is a life-threatening condition where BP falls dangerously to low level after an infection. Again, nitric oxide, its action on the central nervous system. Here it stimulates the releasing hormones such as corticotropic releasing hormone, then GHRH, growth hormone releasing hormone, and luteinizing hormone releasing hormone. Then in platelets, nitric oxide, it inhibits the adhesion of platelets, so it depresses the platelet functions. In macrophages, the nitric oxide which is present is the inducible nitric oxide synthase. So this enzyme produces nitric oxide and peroxynitrite, and this peroxynitrite it is lethal to microorganisms. Okay, so in nitric oxide production in macrophages, it is induced by interleukin and tumor necrosis factor. So in the macrophages, it produces peroxynitrite, nitric oxide synthase. It produces nitric oxide and peroxynitrite, which are lethal to microorganisms. In the intestinal system, nitric oxide, it acts as non-adrenergic, non-cholinergic neurotransmitter in GIT and urogenital tract. So a non-adrenergic, non-cholinergic neurotransmitter, it's a neurotransmitter other than acetylcholine, epinephrine or norepinephrine. So here in this case, it is nitric oxide. So it in the GIT and urogenital tract, it causes relaxation of smooth muscles and leads to reduced gastrointestinal motility and relaxation of sphincters. So in the GIT, it causes reduced gastrointestinal motility, causing relaxation of smooth muscles. Nitric oxide, it can be used in different diseases for their treatment. So first, in case of angina pectoris, nitroprusside here, it has a direct stimulant effect. Nitroprusside, it can directly release nitric oxide, and nitroglycerin requires glutathione to produce nitric oxide. So this nitric oxide, it dilate coronary arteries. So since it dilate coronary arteries, it is useful in the treatment of angina pectoris. So we know about angina. So it is a type of temporary chest pain. Then it is useful in pulmonary hypertension. So inhalation of nitric oxide is important in the treatment of pulmonary hypertension. So where the blood vessels from the heart to lungs, there is increased BP, so that to the lungs. So it also can be useful in high altitude pulmonary edema. So here in case of pulmonary edema, in the normal lungs, there is clear alveoli. No fluid buildup in lungs is seen, but in case of pulmonary edema, fluid can build up in alveoli. So nitric oxide produces pulmonary vasodilatation. In these cases, nitric oxide can produce pulmonary vasodilatation, and without lowering the systemic blood pressure. Then another function is erectile function. Here this happens in case of the corpus cavernosum in the smooth muscles. It relaxes the smooth muscles and increases blood flow into the penis and makes it erect. So there is a sildenafil citrate. It can inhibit a specific phosphodiesterase type 5. So this enzyme, it inhibits hydrolysis of cyclic GMP. So and increases the concentration of cyclic GMP. So once concentration of cyclic GMP is increased, it can relax the smooth muscles in corpus cavernosum. Finally, we have the certain enhancers of nitric oxide activity, enhancers and antagonists. So first we will see which are the enhancers. So here we have S-nitroglutathione. So this is a nitric oxide donor, and as nitroglutathione it can inhibit platelet agglutination. Then there is N-acetylcysteine, which is a glutathione precursor. So this N-acetylcysteine, it protects nitric oxide from being metabolized by free radical scavengers. Okay, so it protects nitric oxide. So these two are the enhancers of nitric oxide activity. Then there are antagonists of nitric oxide such as N-monomethyl arginine, which this can competitively inhibit nitric oxide synthase. So it inhibits nitric oxide production. And then there is asymmetric dimethyl arginine. This is an endogenous arginine analog. So it also inhibits nitric oxide synthesis. So this asymmetric dimethyl arginine, it increases in hyperhomocysteinemia and preeclampsia. So preeclampsia is a condition seen in pregnant women during childbirth and before childbirth. So this is due to lowered nitric oxide production. Preeclampsia, there is hypertension in preeclampsia. So this is due to lower nitric oxide production. So these are the enhancers of nitric oxide and antagonists of nitric oxide. So with that we finish arginine. Now we move on to the next amino acid, histidine. Histidine, so in short we use the first three letters for representing histidine, HIS, and in capital letter H can also be used. So this possesses imidazole ring. So this is the imidazole ring in histidine, and histidine is also semi-essential and it is also basic amino acid. And histidine, its pKa value is 6.1. That is, the dissociation constant of histidine is 6.1. And histidine, it is responsible for buffering action in proteins. For example, albumin. Albumin is a good buffering. It has buffering action property. So it is due to the presence of histidine residues. And also hemoglobin. Hemoglobin can also act as buffer. That is, it can maintain the acid-base balance of the body and they can maintain the normal blood pH. So this is due to the presence of histidine residues. And histidine, this is also glucogenic amino acid. And here iron, if we see the structure of hemoglobin, in hemoglobin, iron present in the heme group, it is attached to globin through histidine residues. So iron, it is attached to the proximal histidine residue, and also there is distal histidine. So in hemoglobin also histidine has role in attachment of iron present in the heme group to the globin chains. We see the metabolism of histidine. Histidine can be decarboxylated. Histidine is decarboxylated to histamine. And carbon dioxide is removed through decarboxylation. So it is this, and COOH is converted to NH2. So it is known as histamine. And then histamine, it is later converted to imidazole acetic acid. Okay, imidazole acetic acid. So from here the end amino group is released, and using molecular oxygen, then NAD is converted to NADH, and there is production of H2O2. Now, the next pathway is here histidine can be acted upon by an enzyme histidase, which this oxidatively deaminates histidine into a compound called urocanic acid. So here amino group is released and it is converted to urocanic acid, and it is again hydrated. It is again hydrated to form imidazolone propionic acid. This imidazolone propionic acid is further cleaved. It is hydrolyzed to give 4-aminoglutamic acid, which is otherwise known as FIGLU, and glutamic acid. Okay, and for this 4-aminoglutamic acid can be later cleaved into N5 4-aminotetrahydrofolic acid and glutamic acid. So this glutamic acid can be later transaminated to alpha ketoglutarate, and which can be later converted to glucose. That is why histidine is glucogenic. And this 4-aminoglutamic acid is converted to 4-aminotetrahydrofolic acid. And this 4-amino group, it is a 1-carbon group. So this histidine can add to the 1-carbon. Histidine can contribute to 1-carbon pool. Now, if folic acid is deficient, in case of folic acid deficiency, this 4-aminoglutamic acid will not be converted to glutamic acid, and this 4-aminoglutamic acid can be excreted through urine. So here 4-aminoglutamate level will accumulate in the blood, and it is also excreted through urine. So here this can be detected by FIGLU excretion test. So this we have seen when you studied folic acid, vitamin folic acid. So this FIGLU level, it accumulates in blood and it is excreted in urine. So the level of 4-aminoglutamic acid, it can be detected by the FIGLU excretion test. So this is a sensitive indicator for folic acid deficiency. Here 5 gram of histidine is given 3 times at 4-hourly intervals, and urine is collected for 24 hours after the initial dose. So normal excretion of 4-aminoglutamic acid is less than 30 milligram per day, but in case of folate deficiency, this value will increase. Then we mentioned histidine contributes to 1-carbon pool. Then histidine can transaminate it to imidazole pyruvate and alanine using pyruvate. So histidine, when it is transaminated, it can produce imidazole pyruvate and alanine. Now next we have histamine. So histamine, it is formed from histidine by the enzyme histidine decarboxylase. So histamine, it is produced by the cells such as platelets, then mast cells and basophils. Okay, histamine, it is produced in these different types of cells, the platelets, then the mast cells and the basophils. Now, what are the effects of histamine? So histamine, it has got effect in smooth muscle contraction, especially in the contraction of bronchial muscles. So that can lead to bronchospasm, and it enhances vascular permeability. So thereby there is fall in blood pressure. Then histamine can stimulate gastric acid. Histamine can stimulate gastric acid secretion. And at high concentrations, if histamine is present at high concentrations, it can cause allergic reactions in the body. Histamine, it requires certain receptors for its action. and the different receptors are H1, H2 and H3. Now we'll see the mechanism action of histamine. So in case of mast cells, so if in case of penicillin, if we take the example of penicillin, if penicillin is introduced, then it can elicit the IgE antibodies fixed on the mast cells. Okay, and this, when the next dose of penicillin is injected, this can react with the already evoked IgE antibodies. Okay, so these IgE antibodies are elicited and this penicillin reacts with these antibodies, and then it causes degranulation of mast cells. Okay, when it is degranulated, histamine is released, and histamine along with certain slow reacting substance, they are released, and this histamine can cause peripheral vasodilatation and fall in blood pressure, and it can also cause anaphylaxis. Okay, so anaphylaxis means it causes your immune system to release certain chemicals, where due to these chemicals blood pressure can drop suddenly, and it can block the airways. So here in the mast cells, it is once represented. In the case of mast cells, certain antigens. So not only penicillin, any other antigens, if they can bind with the IgE antibodies, and this antigen antibody reaction occurs, and this causes, when these antibodies are produced on exposure to certain antigens, they cause degranulation, and histamines are released from the mast cells. Now next we have antihistamines. So antihistamines, they are drugs that can block histamine receptors. So these drugs therefore can be used to control allergic and anaphylactic reactions. So we said histamine, they can cause allergic reactions in the body. So if we use certain drugs that can block histamine receptors, they can control allergic reactions. And the stimulant effect of histamine, we mentioned one of the effects of histamine, that is gastric acid secretion. So that gastric acid secretion of histamine, it is by acting through H2 receptors. So this, if we use this H2 receptor antagonist, these antagonists H2 receptor antagonists therefore can be used in the treatment of acid peptic ulcers of the stomach. This is the gastric ulcers which is seen. So histamine enhances gastric acid secretion through H2 receptors. So if we use antagonist against H2 receptor, these can be used in the treatment of ulcers of stomach. Another clinical condition is histidinemia. Histidinemia, this is an autosomal recessive disease. So autosomal recessive disease means 2 copies of an abnormal gene is present for the disease to develop. So if we see here the parents, from the carrier parents for the disease, if the parents are carriers, and if the abnormal gene from both parents are passed down to the offspring, then if both genes are passed, it will result in an affected child. And if only one abnormal gene is passed from each one of the parent, then they can produce carrier child. And if no abnormal gene is passed, then it results in an unaffected child. So this is autosomal recessive inheritance. That is, both abnormal genes has to be passed down from the parents to the offspring for inheriting the disease. So histidinemia is a type of autosomal recessive disease, and here histidine, there is deficiency of histidase. So we know histidine, it is converted to urocanic acid by histidase. So if this reaction is blocked, if there is deficiency of histidase, the reaction will not take place. So what happens? There is accumulation of histidine in blood and body fluids. So there will be increased excretion of imidazole pyruvic acid, because histidine will be converted to imidazole pyruvic acid, and that will be excreted in urine. So clinical features of histidinemia is mental retardation, and there is delayed speech development. So treatment is to provide low histidine diet. Next is urocanic aciduria. So here there is deficiency of urocanase. Urocanic acid produced from histidine is not getting converted to imidazole or propionic acid. So here both urocanic acid and histidine both are excreted in urine, but here clinical manifestations are minimal. So that's about histidine. Next we move on to lysine. So first letter is LYS, and it's represented by the letter K, because L is also used for representation of leucine. So here for lysine we use the letter K. And lysine is also an essential amino acid. So you know what is essential amino acid, which cannot be synthesized in the body but has to be supplied through the diet. And lysine is ketogenic because it can give rise to the synthesis. Lysine can be used for synthesizing ketone bodies. And lysine is deficient in cereals. And lysine, it has got this is the numbering of lysine, starting from the alpha carbon, beta, gamma, delta and epsilon. This is the numbering of lysine, because the epsilon carbon has some role in different reactions. So we will be seeing it later. So here if we see the catabolic pathway of lysine, lysine can condense with alpha ketoglutarate to produce a compound called saccharopine, and if glutamic acid is removed from this compound, it produces amino adipic acid, which can be converted to alpha keto adipic acid. Again it produces glutaryl CoA and crotonyl CoA, and this can later enter the pathway of odd numbered fatty acids. So if there is congenital deficiency of any of the enzymes involved in this catabolic pathway, lysine level will be accumulated. So it leads to hyperlysinemia, characterized by mental retardation and cortical degeneration. Cortical degeneration is neurodegenerative disease, mainly of the cerebral cortex and ganglia. Functions of lysine, if we see the functions, lysine and hydroxylysine, these are involved in cross linkages in the connective tissues, collagen, and also in elastin. Okay, so then the next function is the epsilon amino group of lysine. It can form Schiff's base linkage in a prosthetic group of proteins. So if we see the pyridoxal phosphate is the prosthetic group in transaminases. So it can form Schiff's base. So here we have PLP and of transaminases, and it reacts with the epsilon amino group. Okay, so it reacts with the epsilon amino group of lysine to form the Schiff's base. So here the R represents the side chain, and this amino group is the epsilon amino group. So in transaminases. This is how Schiff's base is formed. Then we said lysine is involved in cross linkages in collagen and elastin. Then finally, the negatively charged of epsilon group of lysine, it can form salt bridges with oppositely charged groups. For example, in case of hemoglobin, the lysine through its epsilon amino group, it can form salt bridges with oppositely charged amino acids. So lysine can form salt bridge. Lysine contains positive charge and it can form salt bridge with aspartic acid. It is a negatively charged amino acid. Okay. Then we know lysine. It is present in histones. Histones are the basic proteins which are associated with nucleic acids. So it is also seen in histones. Then another final function is precursor of carnitine. Lysine is a precursor of carnitine. Carnitine, we know it is seen in case of beta oxidation, where it is involved in the transport of long chain fatty acids from cytoplasm to mitochondria. So from lysine, actually carnitine is being formed. So from protein bound lysine, in the presence of 3-acetinosyl methionine, it is converted to 3-acetinosyl homocysteine plus protein bound lysine is converted to trimethyl lysine using 3-acetinosyl monomethionine. Then trimethyl lysine is converted to free trimethyl lysine. It is released from the protein. Then with the action of hydroxylase, free trimethyl lysine is converted to hydroxy trimethyl lysine. Then by the action of an enzyme aldolase, it is converted to glycine plus gamma butyryl betaine, and again with the help of hydroxylase, it is converted to carnitine. So we can, in effect, we can say lysine, it is a precursor of carnitine. Okay, so these are the functions of lysine. It forms Schiff's base. Then it is involved in cross linkages in collagen and elastin. Can form salt bridges in hemoglobin. Then it is found in histones, and it is also a precursor of carnitine. So with that we come to the end of this topic. Thank you.